So, you don't just want to give performance feedback, you don't just want to give good performance feedback, you want to give great performance feedback. So in this video, I will share my top tips to help you. First, I'll give you my basic framework to remember how to give your performance feedback a little boost. Yup, remember the word boost. B stands for balanced. And this doesn't necessarily mean an equal amount of positive endorsing feedback and negative critical feedback. What it means is that you should choose the appropriate balance for the development that you want to encourage and the motivation that you want to give. And the other aspect of balance is to balance the right amount of feedback to give and what to withhold. Because if you try to give too much feedback in one go, you will overwhelm the performer. And as a result, their awareness will not properly increase, or they may focus on the wrong aspect. O stands for observed. Give feedback that is based on observational evidence rather than just feelings, perceptions, and beliefs. You will need to be able to justify all of the feedback that you give. The second O stands for objective. Make sure that you are objective about giving performance feedback about the behavior and not giving subjective performance feedback about the person. Don't try to make inferences about things that you cannot know. You cannot know what capabilities they do or don't have. You can only know what you've observed. You cannot know what sort of person they are, what their motivations are, what their beliefs and their attitudes are. You can only know what you have observed about their performance. So give your feedback based on their behavior and not based on your perception of them. The S stands for specific, because generalizations just aren't helpful in improving our performance. We don't know what behavioral changes to make. The more specific you are, the more specific I can be in changing my behaviors, making different choices, and therefore getting better results. And finally, the T stands for timely. The best feedback comes close to the event that you are discussing, but of course not so close that it's inappropriate. So think very carefully about the right timing. My second set of tips for great performance feedback is not to forget the huge impact that spontaneous displays of pleasure from a manager to one of their team about good performance, it could be phenomenal in giving great motivation and encouraging more great behaviors. So give good little bits of positive feedback informally as often as you can. And I have 3 different types of positive feedback that you can give anywhere, anytime, when you catch somebody doing something good. The first is what I call the little stroke, and I take that word from transactional analysis, where a stroke is a single element of recognizing somebody. And a positive stroke is when we recognize somebody for something good. Nice work. Good job. Well done. Thank you. All of those acknowledge somebody in a positive way. It's a small unit of recognition of a good job and work well done. Next, we have what I call the knee-jerk reaction. When you see somebody doing something good and it surprises you, saying, "Wow, fantastic, that's great," really does communicate that you're impressed. And my third simple form of positive feedback is what I call the particular favourite. When someone's done a good piece of work, pick out one element of it to particularly compliment. Particularly like this bit, or this is especially good. What this does is it shows you have taken the time to review it properly and have noticed the details. And one of 2 things will be true. if you do this with integrity. Either you will recognize something that they were particularly proud of, in which case they'll be very impressed that you noticed it, or you will notice something that they weren't particularly aware of, but by drawing their attention to something that is particularly good, they'll become more aware of what matters to you. And to finish this video, I sat down and I just jotted the first tips that came to my mind from my experience of giving performance feedback as a manager. There's nothing clever about these tips, there's nothing special about them, but they are all from my heart and from my experience, and I hope they will serve you well too. And the first one is to keep it simple. Focus on the feedback that really matters. Don't try to prove that you noticed every last detail, particularly with little things and little errors that people made and tiny mistakes. Focus on what matters. The second is to take it slowly. Don't rush. Good quality performance feedback needs to be awareness raising. You can't raise someone's awareness if they don't have time to think about what you're saying. And related to this is give your feedback one chunk at a time. Now, if one observation leads you to a number of pieces of feedback, you can give that observation and then number off those pieces of feedback one at a time. Fourth, as you're giving the feedback, be consciously aware of the non-verbal cues for how that feedback is landing. Do they look puzzled, indicating that maybe they don't understand what you're saying, or it doesn't correlate with their experience? Or are they looking upset or angry? The more you can understand how they're receiving the feedback, the better you can focus the conversation to build that awareness and to help them to take responsibility for the changes that may need to happen. Consequently, as soon as you have given a piece of feedback, check for understanding. Invite them to ask questions. Invite them to tell you what they think that feedback means, so that you can correct them if they are not understanding it properly in the way that you need them to understand it. But because they need to think, my next tip is not to be afraid of silence. The ability to sit in a silence is an important skill for any manager and for any communicator. Because in that silence, work is going on in the other person's mind. And if you interrupt it, not only are you potentially being disrespectful, but you may block them from gaining the deep level of awareness that you're trying to create. And finally, it's not your job to convince them that you're right. They may be defensive, but you don't need to be. Your observations are your observations. It may be that they have counter evidence that you can consider, but if they are arguing against you, rather than hammering home why you are right, invite them to take a break. Invite them to take a pause to think about what you said, and then possibly, if they have counter evidence, to present it back to you. Your job is not to be right, it is to raise awareness and to create a sense of responsibility. Being right is for 10-year-olds. So, great performance feedback is a craft to be mastered. But what I've given you here are my very best tips from my own experience. And I wish you well with your performance feedback. Please do give a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be creating loads more great management courses content, so please do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, keep learning.